Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Right, can you stop a paedophile before they've abused a child with just a single injection? Now, that is the aim of a unique clinical trial getting underway at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden. Researchers there believe that a drug called degarelix, which stops the brain from making testosterone, can combat hypersexuality and aggression, turning off the need to seek out sexual contact with youngsters. The drug has already been tested on 5 Swedish men who called a sexual offenders helpline because they were concerned about their paedophilic inclinations. And now a trial using 60 volunteers, half of whom will receive the drug and half a placebo, is to take place. The trial raises ethical and legal questions about whether societies can come up with therapies for the most dangerous offenders before they've broken the law. Well, to discuss the approach, I'm joined now by Belinda Winder, a forensic psychologist who's pioneered a trial of giving libido-repressing drugs to sexual offenders in prison in Nottingham, and Gabriel Shaw, Chief Executive at the National Association for People Abused in Childhood, NAPAC. Good evening to you both. Belinda, you've been using a different chemical mix for this, but does it work, I suppose, is the first question.
The medications we've been using, yes, they do work. They do work to reduce sexual arousal and sexual preoccupation. But first of all, actually, I'm going to take issue with your first question about spotting a paedophile. We need to be clear that actually many paedophiles do not offend against children. Okay, so there are many people who have an entrenched preference for children. They'll know about this from puberty, but they never offend against children. We then have some paedophiles who are struggling not to offend against children, and some of who lose that struggle, and some paedophiles who don't really care in terms of the damage they'll do to children and will go on to offend. But we have, and we should applaud, the good group of paedophiles who never actually offend against children. And moreover, I'm going to say that many of the people who offend against children are not actually paedophiles. They are people who are sexually indiscriminate, and they will offend against any available outlet, and children are easy pickings, really.
So that's a really interesting starting position. I just want to see whether you agree with that, Gabriel. Is that how you view the kind of spectrum of different conditions?
Yes, that's right. And Belinda has laid it out very carefully. And because one of the concerns I had about this story was the thought that it might be a magical silver bullet, that by giving a drug it would just be a panacea to everything. But let's remember that the abuse of children is not purely driven, or not solely driven, by sexual desire. There's a whole range of issues. It's about power, control, coercion and manipulation. So it can't be just seen as this, if you have this drug, it will just cure everything.
Right. But I just wanted to be clear, do you accept that there are, if you like, benign paedophiles, people who don't actually commit offences, who deserve, if you like, sympathy rather than condemnation?
Yes, there are a range of people who have these leanings, these urges, but it's about the contact offence and what they do with them, the self-determination about that.
Right. Well, now let's go back to the drugs, because this is, I mean, people will hear what you're saying but say, gosh, there's no such thing as a kind of paedophile who deserves respect or agreement. But I want to park that. The drugs work in affecting the way people who, say, worry about their inclinations. The drugs work.
The drugs work on reducing sexual arousal, sexual preoccupation, so people thinking about sex constantly, and people who have recurrent and insistent urges for sexual outlets. They work on reducing that aspect of sexual offending. It's a big aspect of sexual offending, but it's not the only aspect. You've probably got 2 people here who are going to agree with each other.
No, that's fine, that's fine. Do you think we should be promoting these drugs to people who worry about their inclinations?
Well, it's about child protection. Anything that helps protect a child from the risk of harm, of being offended against by people, has to be welcomed. So yes, let's look at this and let's promote it. But if we could take the question more widely, it's about resources. And you can understand that survivor anger would be the case if it was felt that too much or too many resources were being placed on this issue, whereas we know that the support for survivors themselves who have been traumatised, have been abused as children, is just not there. It's very patchy across the UK. So there's a balance to be struck with scarce resources. Where do you place the most?
But the idea is also promoted that you might say, for example, to convicted paedophiles, people who have abuse children. Maybe your sentence will be a little shorter if you agree to some kind of treatment. Now, the survivor community thinks what about that? Do they say, well, that's a practical way of proceeding, or do they say, no, absolutely no way do you trade off?
Well, the first thing is that it's not survivors are not a homogenous group. So to say the survivor community thinks this is a little bit dangerous there. But I think survivors can differentiate, as Belinda has said, about who feel they have these urges but will not offend, and those who won't. And for convicted paedophiles, and this is the other concern that we have, the drug works in this case because people have identified and have self-referred. They actually want to go and be helped. For people who don't want to be helped, for people that, how are you going to apply this? Because it's all about, you know, cooperation and taking it properly. So I have concerns that that's actually going to be the answer for convicted paedophiles and offenders.
Well, you've been looking at this, trialling this in prison.
Yeah.
But just tell me how you do it. Do you say to them you get something in return? I mean, if you're in prison, obviously it's not
People don't get anything in return. The only thing they get in return is they get the benefits of the medication. And remembering, many of our guys in prison don't want to reoffend, don't want to return to prison, don't want to offend against children. And remember, they're not paedophilic offenders necessarily. They're, in our case, men who are offending against children, which includes paedophiles. And, well, it might sound like language, but it's really important that the society takes on board these kind of different parts of terminology.
OK, we're going to leave it there. Thank you both very much.
Okay, thank you.